I'm going to invite everybody to, since you're already comfortable in your homes, to really get comfortable, to sit back, take a breath, and just allow yourself to become present. And as we continue to just breathe easily, we connect with that inner presence of the divine. Keep breathing, allowing that breath to calm ourselves, to bring ourselves lower and slower. And from that place of connection with that inner, we also know that we are connected through that divine oneness with each other. On this Easter Sunday, this Resurrection Sunday, we look to rising in consciousness. We look to awakening and resurrecting into a new reality, that new reality of the truth of our being. The Easter experience is a journey of discovery, of release, of Sabbathing, and then rising into a new way of being. So it had asked you to, using your divine power of imagination, what are you rising into? What have you let go of? Who are you becoming? Not doing, but being. Who are you choosing to be in this world? On this beautiful, snowy day, we affirm our oneness. We affirm our wholeness. We affirm that eternal connection to spirit and to each other. And from that place, we take a few moments in the stillness and just rest into that awareness that I am resurrecting. Say that silently to yourself. I am resurrecting and being reborn into a new me, a new us. So let's just take a few moments in the stillness, connecting with that inner sense, and imagining what we're being birthed into from that place of resurrection and renew in the stillness. And again now, as we come out of that stillness, we use our breath to bring ourselves back present to this moment. We connected with that divine presence, and we are grateful for that opportunity, as our way shower Jesus said, to step apart for a while and to connect with that divine. We embrace the newness of this day. We embrace all that we are becoming. and all that we are guided to. And from that place, we are grateful. And so we say, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And so it is. Amen. And Timothy, usually there's a chant or a song. I'm not sure if you're doing that today.
No, that's going to be at the end of your talk. We're going to do the grateful video that we've done.
Okay, that's cool. So then we'll move right into the talk. Cool. All right. So this is, well, happy Easter to everybody. Let me turn my camera a little bit. Happy Easter, everybody. This is a new experience for me. I'm birthing into a new reality of using technology on a Sunday morning in a way I've never used before. We're all learning this together. So this is Easter. And Easter is a time where we celebrate the life and resurrections of Jesus the Christ. So Easter is a time that actually separates Christianity out from everything else. There were prophets galore in the Middle East. There have been prophets throughout the world through all time, and they continue today. And yet, Easter separates us because without the resurrection, Jesus just was another teacher, just another wise, spiritually enlightened teacher teaching us. But he was willing to step out and show us something we had never seen before, that not even death can contain our spirit, showing us a way of being and a way of thinking that expanded and is still really not clearly understood today. But more importantly than the life and death and resurrection of Jesus, we celebrate the life and the resurrection that is occurring in us. At least I teach that Easter and the resurrection experience is not a singular event, but a culmination of a process that's ongoing throughout our life. It is the preparation, that time of that we call Lent, that time of prepping ourselves with spiritual practices and disciplines, of going within, of possibly denying ourselves some thoughts and some thinking and some maybe even some material things that no longer serve us, culminating with Maundy Thursday, where we get the final teachings of Jesus, the teaching of humility, and the teaching of that he simplified it. Love each other as I have loved you. It's a very clear teaching. And then the release of Good Friday. That which no longer serves, that Good Friday experience for Jesus was letting go of his body, that physical presence which constrained and contained him, and he knew that he was so much more than that. And then the time of resting, that time of Sabbath, of a time of reflecting as we allow that which we've gone through, that journey, that release, to spend some time in the silence of allowing it to coalesce in our heart. And then the awakening to a new self, not the old self, but a new self, released from the bondage of thoughts and ideas and the past that no longer serves. It's oftentimes Nancy Little, many of you know Nancy Little, used to tell me that unity is an Easter denomination and a spiritual teaching. We don't focus so much like much of Christianity focuses on the meaning of the cross, the power of the crucifixion. That's not where unity's intention lies, but rather we focus on the resurrection, that awakening to a new transformative life experience. As Eric Butterworth says, ours is a religion of life, not death. Ours is a religion of claiming our life, whatever that be, claiming our spiritual evolution, not celebrating the death. But Easter and the resurrection does not happen in isolation from the dying. It doesn't happen in isolation from that release. I always say a good resurrection experience is coupled with a good dying experience, and it is not for the faint of heart. It's not easy. And let me be clear, in case there's anybody out there who doesn't understand unity teaching. Jesus did not die on the cross for your sins. That's not our teaching. Jesus did not die. There is no one can redeem you from yourself but yourself. So that's not a teaching that we will embrace, and you'll never hear it from me, at least. So, but we must embrace the darkness. We must embrace the shadows that come with that release in the Good Friday experience. To get the benefits of the resurrection and the transformation that comes with the resurrection, we must embrace and not hide from the work, oftentimes the pain, the struggle, and yes, sometimes even the suffering that occurs when we're in our Good Friday experience. So I use myself oftentimes as an example of this. When I was going through 27 years ago with my heart condition and my addictions to substances and having to let go of them, face my own mortality, let go of those things, the substances that I had used was like a literal, very close to, but almost like a literal death. That the pain and the suffering that not only that I felt, but those around me felt. So oftentimes our suffering is collective. I still remember my mother's looking at my mother's eyes as she would see me and thinking that that she was going to outlast me, which is never what a mother wants to hear. I also think in terms of how many, you can just raise your hand, we don't have to get talking. How many came from a different religious tradition to come to unity? So many people, very few people are raised in unity. They come possibly from a long held, maybe a Catholic, a Lutheran. Of course, if you're in Wisconsin, it's Catholic or Lutheran. There's not much else. Letting go of a family race tradition that's been part of your life, it actually feels like it's part of your DNA. And yet that releasing, because that consciousness, that teaching no longer works, can feel like a literal death. And to many of your family, it may actually mean that you've died to them. I know some of the more, I've known some people from other religious traditions where the family will actually shun them when they say they no longer can embrace that. So that Good Friday experience is something that we can't shy away from, because it leads to inextricably to the ability to have that resurrection. When we hide from the bad, what we call the bad, the negative, the hurt, the pain, we also deny ourselves the joy and the possibility of the transformation. So we teach not so much the physical death, but rather the emotional, the mental, the spiritual death. And when this occurs, the experience of true transformation and resurrection into a new way of being, a new reality can occur. That which is no longer true, no longer fits. It's not that it was bad, it just doesn't work anymore. As Jesus said, you don't put old wine into a new wineskin. You resurrect into something new, and that which was, you let go of. It no longer fits the life that you're becoming. Interesting, I was reading Myrtle Fillmore's How to Let God Help You, and she says, but there will be challenges, because those old thoughts, those old ways of being, those old consciousness will try to creep back in. And she says, that's okay. Don't resist it. That's God showing you still got some work to do. But she says what you need to do is immediately recognize and again, deny it, release it, and affirm who you truly are now. So in unity, Easter is not a one-time event that happened 2,000 years ago, but an ongoing process of denying and releasing beliefs, patterns of beings, and ideas that no longer align with our true Christ nature. And again, let me say, it is a process. It is a process of discovery, of work. It really is work, and it takes courage. And you quite frequently, not always, but frequently accompanied by pain. And sometimes suffering as we resist that pain and that release. Because I'll tell you, the ego does not let go easily. The ego grabs hold and can actually become quite manipulative and vicious. So the ego is not going to let go easily. And so our work is to continue that process. And though we're active participants, oftentimes this transformational process is put to us through circumstances that we find ourselves in. I've often said, if you're in the middle of the lake and everything's fine and the water's really calm, very few people tip the boat over just to see what would happen. We usually need to be in the rapids before we're willing to make a change and say, something's not working here. I have to do something different. So it's not so much how we get to that Good Friday experience, though we can be intentional and deliberate about it. It's what do we do with it when we're in the midst of it? Do we run from it? Do we hide from it? Do we, like Peter, do we deny it? I don't know him. Or do we embrace it and willingly put ourselves up on the cross, which is willingly submit to whatever comes? I'm willing to go through it so that because I know, I affirm the good is waiting for me and the power of the resurrection in me will guide me to my good. I think what we're all going through individually with our social and physical isolations but we're also going through this collectively is the perfect metaphor for the Good Friday experience. It was imposed on us. There's not a person I know that would say, let's have a good worldwide pandemic so that we can all wake up to a new reality. This is a complete disruption of everything we've known. Businesses are shut, churches, we're doing church online we're doing everything different. And there's personal pain that's going on. Almost every day I talk to a student or I talk to a minister, or I talk to a congregant who's gone into a crisis mode for the moment. And I get to listen to them as they try to make sense out of what happened, or a relative just came down with the virus, or even like Reverend Pat, his nephew lives in New York City, right downtown. He says the sirens go off 24 hours a day. There's a waiting line at the emergency room. People can't even get in, even with normal things. There's this collective pain as we watch it. And there is the possibility, if we claim and learn the lesson of a new way of seeing and a new way of being in the world, understanding the interconnectedness, we can hide from it. We can pretend we want to go back to something that probably never existed. But if we don't learn from it, we'll just experience this again. I heard this interesting story about a gentleman went to the banquet and he could see all the marvelous items on the buffet table. He could smell the food. And yet he looked at the people attending the banquet and they all looked starving and they all looked miserable. And he couldn't understand, how can you be miserable? The music was playing, the food, the drinks, everything was flowing. And then he saw that they all had 2-foot-long forks and they didn't know how to feed themselves. They couldn't take any nourishment in and they were miserable. And the waitress came over and said, come to another room. And he heard laughter and he smelled the food, the same type of buffet, the music playing, the fountains are flowing and the people were happy. They had the same 2-foot-long forks. What they realized is they couldn't feed themselves with that fork, but they could feed somebody else. They learned from the experience that was imposed upon them that they had the ability to do it differently. And others, which is there is no others, all were fed and sustained. We're in that experience. When we enter our Easter experience, we have two choices. We can step forward, embrace the pain, and claim the transformation, or we can shrink back in our fear of change and long for a time that didn't exist anyhow. To hide and try to wall ourselves off from the rest of the world so that we'll be safe and will be protected. I think it's an Edgar Allan Poe story during the plague where the people wanted to protect themselves in that manner. They walled themselves off. So when the plague came, there was no place for them to go because they had walled themselves in. There's a Siberian myth that says when you want to hurt somebody, you crawl into their tent and close their smoke hole. When you close their smoke hole, God can't see them. Close the smoke hole and you break the connection to the divine world, the mountains, the rivers, the trees. Close the smoke hole and we become mad. We close the smoke hole and we're possessed by ourselves and only ourselves. Close the smoke hole and you have only your neurosis and yourself for company. And this time of Easter, of resurrecting into a new experience, I'll leave you with this thought. How do we open our smoke hole? How do we open our smoke hole up into a greater understanding of the divine? How to connect more with not just ourselves and that inner self, but also connect with the outer selves. That's what we're being called to really embrace the unity teaching of oneness, to really embrace the true unity teaching of wholeness, to embrace that unity teaching is there is enough for everyone, that we're all in the same boat together. And that when we're in the same boat together, when everybody's rowing in different directions, we get nowhere. And we just live in our fear. We're being called to embrace the radical teachings that Jesus taught us. Finally, after 2,000 years, that transformation of the world is yearning and crying out for us if we are willing to have the courage to claim it. To claim the teaching of forgiveness, to claim the teaching of love your neighbor as yourself, to claim the kingdom of heaven is within us now, to be humble, and to treat the least of these as you would treat him. These are radical teachings that we still have embraced after 2,000 years. And now with the resurrection experience, we've been given a divine opportunity. And like all divine opportunities, they're not easy, they're not even simple, but they are possibilities for us to do this differently. So on this Easter Sunday, as we resurrect, I bless each of you as you resurrect into that next level of thinking, of believing, of acting in the world and align with the truth of your being and the truth of the teachings that we have been teaching for over 100 years. I love you. I bless you. I behold the living presence.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you.